Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my first update on my experience with the Lenovo Legion 7i for 2023. Now, this is the 8th generation of this machine. You may have noticed I've got the 7th gen right behind it, and that is because I will be doing a direct comparison between the two for those of you trying to figure out which machine is right for you. Now, with that out of the way, before I start going over my initial impressions of this gaming rig, let's talk about pricing and specifications. So the model that Lenovo sent over for review has an Intel 13th gen i9 CPU, an Nvidia RTX 4080 with 12 gigs of VRAM, and the new power limitations are just amazing. 150 to 200 watts for that GPU, so thermal throttling, a thing of the past, at least for this brand new 8th generation. We have 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM, 2 NVMe slots, only one of them is filled in this review unit, and we've got a 1 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe Samsung drive in there. Excellent performance as you would expect. Speakers seem to be the same as last generation. The display is also the same. There are two options though, I will point out. The review unit I have has a 16:10 aspect ratio, both machines do, 2560 by 1600 resolution, 240 hertz refresh rate. 500 nits of brightness, essentially the same panel in that previous gen machine, but if you want more balance for, I would say, a wider variety of work and don't care about having the highest refresh rate or G-Sync, because this panel has it, you can step down to their mini LED option, which is only 165 hertz, but appears to render much better color accuracy, so a more balanced panel. With that out of the way, pricing and specs, I'll include a link in the description. Let's take a look and a listen to the display and speakers. I'll go ahead and fast forward to something that has not actually been taken into account here so that you can see what the Wi-Fi performance is like. Very little buffering, as you may have noticed. And I think you can see clearly the display quality is very good. So between what is a very, very good experience with this IPS panel, very little backlight bleed, in fact, nothing noticeable in a lit room, and the ability to get up there, punch in 500 nits of brightness, and still game at 240 hertz. We have G-Sync. This is an ideal panel. Also, not just for gaming, but productivity work as well, since we have that 16:10 aspect ratio. Now, when it comes to the performance of that 4080, I believe this is the sweet spot. You can see Time Spy 18,621, average score being 18,437. So from a benchmarking standpoint, this machine is an absolute monster. And just to give you a reference point, the previous generation that I have here, Gen 7 with a 3080 Ti and a 12th gen CPU from Intel, we were benchmarking right around, I think, 12 to 13,000. So that is a really big gap. Again, today's video is not about comparing the two, but something you should be aware of. And then just an idea, if we were running Red Dead Redemption 1440p at Ultra, you'd get over 75 frames and then if we jump to, let's say, Battlefield 5, over 180 frames. Now, this is just a preliminary first update, but you start to see what this machine is capable of. It is just a complete monster. Now, the NVMe that I mentioned, you can see the performance right there, and it's what you'd expect from a Gen 4 drive from Samsung. Potentially, this can only be improved, in my opinion, and something that you should all be aware of. There are two NVMe slots, but you will not be able to put a double-sided NVMe in the primary slot that will only fit in the secondary, which is a common thing these days with a wide array of manufacturers. So no surprises when it comes to the performance. Before I get to I/O and what is different between this model when it comes to things not under the hood, but everything else, build quality, and things that Lenovo removed for cost-saving measures, let's just run down other things you need to know. 1080p webcam, no Windows IR capability. We do have a privacy switch, of course. Other things that you should be aware of when it comes to battery life, or at least from what I'm seeing, it looks like you can get around 5 to 6 hours. That is not playing games or running power-hungry software. In order to get full performance from this, you will need to be plugged in to the new 330-watt power brick. I will show you what that looks like now. It is substantially smaller than the previous generation. We are going to lose the LED lighting as I do this, or at least I thought we would, but there it is, and it is substantially smaller. I would say about a third smaller than the previous generation, and it is rated at 30 watts more than that older, wider brick. Other things to be aware of: we have less RGB lighting on this machine. We no longer have pressure-sensitive keys for WASD. Plastic trackpad, no longer glass. No more fingerprint scanner here on the power button. I don't really personally care about that. We went from 4 Type-C ports to 2, but the 2 that we have are Thunderbolt 4, highly functioning. Both can support power delivery, one of which, or I believe both, but I'll stand corrected in the full review if I'm wrong about this, 140 watts on both. That's a higher threshold than the previous generation. They also both support 1.4 DisplayPort capability out, which means 4K 120 out of either of them is, of course, possible, and that's if you don't want to use HDMI 2.1. We have a mux switch, as you anticipated. When it comes to gaming, I really don't see what kind of hurdles you're going to run into, since there's no throttling that I've seen so far from benchmarking. Lenovo's Vantage software, one of the big improvements we got this year is that we now have a custom mode, which means you're not relegated to performance, balance, and quiet mode. Keep in mind, the balance mode does have an AI engine now. I'm not sure how much that's going to impact the balance mode, but supposedly performance will be better there. That's something I'll address in the full review. The other nice thing about the custom mode is fan speed control, because now you can control anything you like there. When it comes to performance inside custom mode, you literally can configure anything you want. So this is a big jump for Lenovo, and I think this is one of the primary features that many of you are going to love about this new build, especially because of how much performance we're gaining with that 13th gen processor and the 4080 under the hood. I would steer clear of the 4070. In fact, if you're looking at 4070 builds, you might be better suited looking at the previous generation. I'll save that for the comparison. But the 4080 and the 4090 are just monsters. Again, 12 gigs of VRAM here. I can only imagine what the 4090 performance would be like. I think it's running now about $500 more than this particular build. And the best price I've seen on this build so far was from B&H for $2,200. I think it now went up to $2,300 US, which in my opinion is a steal for the performance you're getting here. I mean, I haven't tried video editing yet or photo editing, but I know that this machine is going to chew all of that up and spit it out. And then when it comes to professional software like Revit, AutoCAD in the design realm, I think that many of you out there are going to be really pleased with what this machine can deliver. So a lot to like here. What I'm seeing initially, yes, some things are gone, as I mentioned. More plastic in the construction. We lost the pressure-sensitive keys, less RGB lighting. We also, when it comes to I/O, I'll just give you a quick runaround. But before I do that, no more lit icons on the back I/O. You can see now we just have, a little LED to let us know that we're getting power, whereas in the past all of these would be lit, which was great if you were in a dark environment. It was really easy to see all of your ports. On the left side of the machine, you can see we've got a Type A USB port and then a Thunderbolt 4 port, as I mentioned, capable of 4K 120. It's fully functional and power delivery. Your power port here on the back right, two USB Type-A ports, HDMI 2.1, another Thunderbolt 4 port, fully functional. The gigabit Ethernet port rather, is now only gigabit, and it's been flipped upside down. The previous generation was 2.5 gigabit. Do not ask me why. I'll get into that in my full review. Another Type-A USB port, a privacy switch for the camera, and your combo jack for headphone microphone right there. And that's pretty much it on this build. Easy to upgrade. Not as easy, believe it or not, to take this apart as the previous generation. But I think there's a lot to like about this. Yes, design changed. I do personally think the previous design was nicer. I think the hardware and the overall attention to detail on Gen 7 was better. I liked this little cutout. I liked the brushed aluminum soft touch finish. It just is a more premium feeling machine. But I think that in every way, the new machine, even omitting those things, is better because pricing should be more aggressive, and performance certainly destroys this. I mean, based on just the CPU-GPU combo here, not even getting too deep into the RAM, I mean, I'm seeing gains between 20 and nearly up to 40% over the previous generation, and that is huge, meaning the 3080 Ti to the 4080. I mean, that is monstrous performance. And when it comes to the I/O, again, I do think this machine is just really, really nice. The Gen 7, nicer cosmetically, aesthetically, build quality, but I think one of the key components for some of you will be the I/O, in that it has 4 Type-C ports, 2 Thunderbolt 4 right there, not both capable of power delivery, so something to be aware of. Only this guy is on the back right here. And then, as you can see, our 4th Type-C port. The only Type-A ports were right here on the back of the machine. Also, the LED strip wrapped around to here. It now terminates on the new model on the front of the unit itself. So, as I mentioned, less RGB. You can see it ends right there where my thumb is touching. It's not incredibly clear. And as I already showed all of you, those Type-C ports have gone away in favor of Type-A ports, which, same number on the back, but of course, things have changed. Now, I don't think that's a bad downgrade if you're looking at it that way, because again, you've got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports that are even more functional than the previous generation, and ultimately everyone who's looking at this machine is chasing performance per dollar, and that's exactly what this machine hits out of the park. But I can't help but feel like maybe that's a reason that it shouldn't be the 8th generation of what used to be a more premium machine, and this is a consensus across the board. If Lenovo was going to cut corners to make this more aggressive in terms of pricing, then maybe this shouldn't be the 7i Pro. But that's a conversation for another time. Either way, it is still a premium machine that I have no problem recommending. I'm personally drooling over getting one myself when the right deal rolls around. And I think that's another area where these cost-cutting measures that Lenovo employed are going to be helpful down the road. You may have also noticed that the hinge changed. Rather than being encompassing like to the entire deck, it now just has 2 spots. You can see that right there. Again, for anyone who is unfamiliar, that is probably one of the physical changes to the machine that is an actual improvement rather than a cost-cutting measure where they corrected something. And Wi-Fi performance here with the 6E chipset has been good. No complaints about that. That's what I was trying to demonstrate when scrubbing ahead in that YouTube video. But overall, so far, this machine screams, and I think it's going to make a lot of people really, really happy. And the fact that pricing should be more amenable is definitely going to just further that happiness. So really like what I'm seeing out of this. The comparison should be interesting. I'm curious to hear what your impressions are of the new 7i Pro Gen 8. Again, the design here in the previous gen nicer, but we all know that the departure from the design is not major. It's more nuanced. And ultimately, since performance is so much better and now we have that custom mode for overclocking, I think that it's just a whole new beast. Would I like to see these things come back? Sure. That's something I'll get into a little bit more detail in the next video. And I just noticed they even got rid of the little bit of branding on that front lip here. So another thing that they just pulled out in order to save some money. But I can't criticize Lenovo for that, since the performance here is basically just about best in class for its price. And that's something I will touch on in the full review once I confirm a lot of what I've been reading, besides benchmarking, about how this particular build with its 4080 is matching a lot of 4090 performance, which is totally insane. And at 5 to 6 hours of battery life for general use, I haven't really pushed it to see how much more I could get. I do think that, as I've stated over and over again in this update, so many of you are going to be happy with it. And those of you who want to save some money, the Gen 7 is going to offer that with nice differences as well, considering the build quality is even better in many ways than the brand new Gen 8. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them, hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.